Welcome to the Psychedelic podcast, where we get a condor's eye view on what it looks like to live epic through psychedelic integration. Condor's eye, because you will understand why in a minute when I introduce today's special guest. Today I started my integration ritual with deep gratitude. I'm laughing, but honestly, I'm also crying a little bit. I'm just feeling a lot better than when I did just a few days ago. I'm recovering from an illness. I just returned from Envision Festival, which was interesting, but I did return ill. So I just woke up feeling grateful for being able to get out of my bed and walk. And right now I feel good and I'm whole and I'm ready to roll. Just a disclaimer that this podcast is for educational purposes only, and it does not in any way, shape, or form condone the use of illicit substances or partaking in any illegal activities. So if you make a choice to engage with powerful psychedelics and plant medicines, then please do so mindfully, my friends. Our guest today is yet another multidimensional creatrix. If you haven't noticed yet, this is turning out to be the season of the most badass multidimensional creatrixes that I know. So here's another one for you today that I hold in very high regard. And when I think of the word psychedelic warrior, this person is what comes to mind. Now, just a warning, you are about to be absolutely floored by her story. I usually read the bio, but I have to say this person's story is so compelling that it literally feels like we need to hear it straight from the mouth of the divine itself. And the divine's name today is Colette Condorcita Schmidt. Colette, sister, hermana, welcome. Hola, mi amor.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
Oh my God, this is such an honor. I do have to start with a fun fact from your bio, just because it's so offbeat. So you were raised by social justice activists in the Quaker community in Philadelphia. Please take us down that yellow brick road, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, it's so awesome to be here with you. Congratulations on the podcast. I've caught a few episodes. It's amazing. So Philadelphia, the first settlers that came from Europe, were, kicked out of England, and they were, this radical Quaker community. And a lot of people don't really understand who the Quakers are. They think about like the Quaker oat man, they're like, oh, like the oat guy, right? This
exactly.
Product it's very well known. And, I got this like Quaker picture on it from the 1600s probably. But the Quakers were radical in England because they challenged the religious Christian institution of the Church of England, which was a political and religious entity, and that they believed in that of God in everyone. And the way that they fundamentally practiced their own form of spirituality is to sit in a room with each other in silence that's not really led by any one individual. Usually it's a group of elders. And you sit in silence facing each other on these, what they call facing benches, in silent meditation, communicating with God on your own terms. And if somebody feels called to speak on by the Great Spirit, let's say, you'd stand up and share with the group. And so Philadelphia, where I was born and raised, has a really classically bad school system, unless you're in a very wealthy school district, which I was not in. So my parents, sent me to Quaker schools. Unfortunately, for most of my life, I did go to Philly public school for a bit. But having that foundational institution in my youth that was very social justice oriented. My parents are social justice activists. We've been involved in, like for example, growing up in a majority Black city, I was involved in what could be called Black Lives Matter types of activism from the time I was in 8th grade. So I've been involved in really looking at society and culture and my part in it and the relative privilege that I have in different ways and how to be part of this ethic. And the Quakers, even though historically when they first landed, they did have, slaves from what I understand. They became radically anti-slavery and abolitionists. Like my school, for example, had hidden chambers in it where they would hide slaves on their way to get even further north when it became, even though we were above the Mason-Dixon line, There was a period of time where, slave owners were able to go north and look for their slaves, and people had to go further north into Canada. So this type of culture and community that I was raised in, and it very much affected my life and has influenced my path.
Wow. Yes. Well, tell me more about, I mean, I'm already speechless and we barely even got started. Okay. So who was who was Colette that grew up at that time in Philly before you found psychedelics? Tell me more about that.
Well, it's interesting. The type of household that I was in was very loving and very caring, but I had an older sister that had a lot of complex mental health challenges, and it very much affected the dynamics of my family. And school was very much a safe space for me, and just absolutely loved it. And it was a lot of experiential learning time outside, connecting with nature, learning about, I was learning about Native American culture in first and second grade. That was like the focus of the years. So it was like very experiential, very nature based, and in a way, very psychedelic, my education, very creative. And I was also like, huge for my age always, very like the tallest, biggest kid in the class. Very athletic, like grew up playing all the sports, was like one of the two girls who would like play football with the boys during recess, doing all the sports, competitively swimming. And then by the time I was in high school was when I started competitively wrestling in middle school and high school. And it was a big part of, I've always, looking back on it, I've always been neurodivergent. I've always and sort of a way that I think I've always helped that part of how my nervous system functions is through extreme physical activity and kind of embedding that in the day. And so when I was in like middle school and high school, I really wanted to wrestle as just like the next level expression of my physicality and training and competition. And yeah, so like my life was really like that, for so many years.
So your bio mentioned something really interesting about you that is very unique. So I understand that as a wrestler, you suffered some type of an injury.
Yes, I was when I was in ninth grade, still very young. Uh, I was competing in a wrestling meet, in a meet, competition, and I had a very serious spinal cord injury. I almost completely severed my spinal cord. I was paralyzed from the neck down immediately. It's a very interesting and it's probably the most definitive moment that I've experienced in my life so far. And what happened was that I dreamt about the injury exactly as it happened 2 weeks before it happened. And I actually tried to get out of competing that day. But I didn't on a conscious level like sync up this dream with this moment and this particular like moment in time. But I did like give up my weight class to an upperclassman and was like not wanting to compete that day. And then through circumstance, I was really encouraged to compete actually after the meet, like more so for just like for basically athleticism and for the process of like training and stuff. Because I was very much still learning how to. Wrestling is a very complex sport. It looks like for people who don't not understand it, it's incredibly complex and intricate. So I was very much still in my training process, but was doing well. And so by circumstance, when I broke my neck, when I had my injury, I had an out of body experience that was the same as this dream that I had had weeks before. And it was kind of this overwhelming sense of really like shame and grief for being like, oh my God, how did I not like see this? Kind of like, oh man, like I saw this and I didn't sync it up. And this was this moment in time where I was in my out of body experience and I could feel what could be considered the other side behind me. Like I could feel that portal of death, which I've studied a lot in my life, really through the medicines, through the medicine technologies, and in other ways in my life through different transpersonal experiences and how my nervous system just fundamentally works since my injury. And so I was like, okay, I feel that other side. Am I going there? Where am I going? I'm hanging out here. And then before I knew it, I was right back in my body again. And
You
so
literally remember that awareness?
yes, super
Wow.
clearly, super vividly. To the point that when I went back into my body, because I, the people around me, thank God, and this is 25 years ago. So there was no like cell phones then. There was no like this was after hours. There was not even like a phone where we were competing. We're at an away school. And fortunately, people around me knew not to move me, but they didn't realize. They thought maybe I broke my clavicle or something like that, but they were like, don't move her. And I wasn't really clear enough to share, but what I was clear to share was I should have avoided this. And I literally even called my captain over. They were like, what do you need? And I was like, bring Captain Doug over so I could talk to Doug, who was our team captain. And I said to him, like, fuck, I should have fucking avoided, like, I should have avoided this. Like, how did I do it? And they're all like, what are you talking about? And my mom shared with me when she first saw me in the hospital that I said the same thing to her. And so what happened after that was a very interesting process of my family did not tell me this at the time, but the doctors told my family that I had less than a 2% chance of recovery. And I later found out that the doctors told that to my family to give them some sense of hope with the 2%, because really it was 0%. It was like her spine is almost completely severed. Her two, C4, C5 facets are locked side by side. And there was, without necessarily going into the details of the story, what happened for me was a very interesting multidimensional process of repair that I think was incredibly karmic, incredibly practically related to allopathic medicine in the here and now that I graciously was able to receive, as well as the 5 months of recuperating in the hospital, integrating really information that I was receiving on an unconscious level and how to psychically repair my body. So it was really a combination of all of these different facets that lined up that allowed me to eventually walk out of the hospital. Yeah.
Wow. 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 So here's this teenager that got injured in a sports event in high school. And then you find yourself moment to moment in a hospital, and more than that, transcending between realms and
Yes.
not almost communicating with different realities and discovering information on how to return to an integrated system where you could not only recover, but literally bring these codes of healing back and understand more about yourself and also communicate them to others. Is that right?
Yeah, what I would say was that there was this portal that really opened when my injury happened, and especially those first few weeks of being paralyzed. I mean, I was on a ventilator. I had surgery. I had a halo. People don't understand what it's like to be on a ventilator. Nobody's putting you on a ventilator unless you really need it. So I'll say that. And just once you get off a ventilator, let alone when you're paralyzed, like the process of recovering your lungs, the phlegm, I was in insane physical shape when I got hurt. Insane physical shape. And within like 2 weeks of being paralyzed, I remember they were moving my body for the first time, like really like trying to get me to sit up. And I looked and I got like view of my legs, and I was like, I looked like, I had been starving. So it's something that like what happened was this deep psychospiritual process opened up, but then there was a very real physical reality that I had to just be present with, and it was incredibly hard. So it was like there was this spaciousness of that opening up and this information that I was receiving over time, but the full-on accessibility of, I would say, what I'm sure we're probably going to talk about is like, let's say, shamanic neurophenomenology was working in the background and in these subtle ways, but it didn't really fully expand for me until about a year after my injury. So, but yes, it was there. And it was also like, wait, we're not going to give her like all of this and all of it, like, because it's just too much, is how I could perhaps describe it. So yeah, it was a very real and like unbelievable how my family supported me through that time. My mom and dad were trying to keep together their work life My mom would go to work in the day and sleep next to me every single night in the hospital for, almost 5 months. She was an incredibly intricate part of why I'm still alive, because she has, advanced medical know-how and knew how to advocate for me. So there's all of these different parts of the puzzle, and people are like, how did you do that? And I'm like, it's not just like the Joe Dispenza, oh, I broke my neck, and I just thought my way through it. And I would love to see like Joe Dispenza's like, I'm like, show me your MRIs, Joe, because like I want to know, like I want to know what those look like. you
Oh
know
my God.
but really it's really this multidimensional integrated process, which I think most things are, especially from a health perspective. So
Absolutely. Again, what I'm hearing is being tapped into this other world, right? While remaining connected with the limited capacity and the humbling capacity of the body in its most humblest form, and
yeah,
having to tend to be, or maybe being called to tend to both of these and merge between them and integrate them and bring these new things again that you're learning from. And I'm curious if there's even a possibility to describe what you've learned in that process, or I mean, are there any words that can even describe?
I think that I was already raised with which I'm very grateful for, but let's just say like an extreme sense of the suffering of the world around me, the suffering of others, and let's just say like the state of the human condition, and the variety and flavors of the human condition, right? And not just to say that there's only suffering, but that it's very interesting. Like I was listening to the book Sapiens. I just landed on my land in Costa Rica after 6 months. I was listening to the book Sapiens driving up for the first time, which is exceptional, and everyone should listen to that or read it. But around, going into let's just say the neurophenomenology of the sapien experience, of Homo sapiens, right? And how it's so intrinsic to how we divide people up and pit ourselves against each other based on speaking of different languages or colors or sexes or religious ideology or these different things of like categorization. And so for me, I'm disabled. I've recovered a lot from my injury. I can walk, but I walk with a limp on one side. I have a lot of neurological weakness. I have immune system issues. I have bowel and bladder challenges. Just putting it all out there for y'all. I recovered a really, really serious injury that like literally nobody thought I'd even recover, like sensation below my neck. Um, and uh, and it's literally 1 in a billion chances of recovery. It's like not even. I've never even met anyone who's had anything close to what I went through and has recovered. Um, and so this kind of in and of itself has really continued to build my framework of having a lot of compassion for the human experience, let's say. And also, I think just especially more and more, like being an advocate for disabled folk and neurodivergent folk, who I think there's a lot of neurodivergent folk in the psychedelic community, and our awareness of that culturally in kind of balancing out the pathology paradigm of mental health with a neurodivergent paradigm of mental health is just in its infancy and is very much part of the psychedelic revolution we're in. So I would say like that's been how it's informed me, and trying to radically have as much patience as possible for my body, because I still love to like use it in extreme levels.
Hmm.
But yeah, it is what it is. So
Yeah. Thank you. So you also mentioned earlier the term shamanic neurotype. Can you tell us what that means to you?
yeah, so I think that there's so much interesting writing that I've been diving into the last few years, and scholarly writing on really the what we could consider the neurophenomenology of shamanism. And this is really uniquely different than the concept of an individual who is from a traditional shamanic culture and goes through a process of initiation into that culture. It's incredibly important for me to make that distinction, because I'm not a shaman. I grew up, with parents who were first generation. All my grandparents came from other countries, in Philly, in a modern, and through the process of my injury and how my neurological, psychological self changed as a result of that injury is classically part of the cross-cultural, found literally around the world, phenomenon of shamanism, and how people there's and for people who are interested in this concept to read about, I would say start with Michael Winkelmann, who has amazing works and dedicated his whole PhD anthropological career on the study of this. And what he did that was so unique, Cherie, which is people who are interested in kind of studying the historical literature of shamanism. The word shaman is a word that was taken by early ethnographers and, let's say, anthropologists, kind of the newfound community of anthropologists, when sort of the colonizing Europeans left Europe and it started to value lots of different cultural phenomenon around the world, they saw shamanic phenomenon everywhere. And it was vilified and considered to be unholy and not even human in lots of different contexts. And this is what can oftentimes happen when one culture is valuing another culture through their beliefs and their structures and systems, which is why we have a lot of the problems that we have in the world today, right? So, but the word shamanism or shaman, when, over time, there's a monumental book by an individual named Mircea Eliade, who was a historian that wrote a book in the 50s called Shamanism and the Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy. That what is absolutely tremendous. I mean, it's like 2 inches thick book, and like it's a thick read. But what he did was he went around and he identified the cross-cultural phenomenon of shamanism and how people kind of get inducted. And there's kind of like one of 3 ways. They have basically the exact same situation that I just explained through my injury, or they're identified in their youth, oftentimes by expressing different types of neurodivergent phenomenon that we could perhaps label in, let's say, like autism kind of spectrum phenomenon, seizure phenomenon. It's actually acutely different than schizoaffective phenomenon, which oftentimes people associate with shamanism, but it's not, generally speaking. And or there's sort of this other process of nepotism that happens, like, oh, that you're the kid of a shaman, you're up next, like you're next in line. And so there's really these 3 parts of the process. And that's oftentimes what happens and how people become these roles in, generally speaking, what we consider quote unquote hunter-gatherer societies. And it was the first way that when we look at the development culturally of Homo sapiens, that the transpersonal, let's say, the transpersonal shamanic phenomenon that was held by certain leaders that would tie the group together through ritual, through ceremony, through storytelling, through myth. This is how humans developed. This is how humans also too got to the process where once you kind of signed up for that, as opposed to just being like pre-culturally that in a Homo sapien ancestral animal lineage, that it was way easier to go out and just kill each other. But once you kind of adopted the same cultural values, let's say, it was easier to be like, oh, I'll come in and marry these women, or I'll come in. It's like adopting the myth and the lore and the sort of transpersonal phenomenon that was held by shamanism. So in relationship, bringing it back to me and my neurological psychospiritual experience, I'm someone that has let's just say, the way that I see everything around me is in a deep process of looking at the systems that come from it in a very multidimensional way. Like I kind of express it like my brain works like psychedelics, and I use psychedelics to understand my own neurophenomenology. And it's been incredibly interesting and beautiful and also very challenging, as people could imagine, let alone when this really came online for me starting like a year after my injury. And at that time, I really thought I was losing my mind. And my mom even said to me, this was long before I ever even heard the word shamanism, and it was like when suddenly like I had this moment that people might call spiritual emergence, people could call not psychotic, but like, people have all these different labels they could put to it. I had this moment And my mom said to me, like in this sort of recovery process, because I was really like, oh my God, what is going on? I'm from Philly, like, I was like all like trying to imbalance these things. And my mom said to me, a lot of cultures, value this, and it's called shamanism. And she said that to me like when I was, like 16 years old. And it started a seed of growth and development and transformation until this moment of my 40 years of life.
How affirming is that to hear from your mother a word that encapsulates your experience? I can just imagine like what an impact this has had on your journey. My goodness.
My mom's an amazing, very
Yeah.
powerful woman. Yeah.
My goodness.
Something I just want to share real quickly. A big part of my healing process through the immediacy of my spinal cord injury and the subsequent timeline was having the realization of how interconnected I am with my mother on a soul level, and how that information continues to reveal itself and is like so amazing and interesting and like wow. But yeah, I just want to share that. Like we all do from my perspective.
I mean, you're both so lucky to experience a bond like this in your lifetime and really explore it consciously together and nourish from it and be elevated from it. So how does all this tie to psychedelic change work? What is psychedelic change work?
Yeah, psychedelic change work is a phrase that came to me with, I think like a lot of us when COVID started, it was this really monumental. It was a monumental shift for most people in their life, and it started a really big process for me of integration. I'd spent quite a few years before that, spending a lot of time in Colombia, studying with the Yahe culture, facilitating ayahuasca Yahe work, lots of time studying ethnobotany, etc. And I was really concerned with a lot of how ungrounded people's frameworks were getting around me in the psychedelic community, my own framework, and let alone sort of things that I witnessed in the unfolding of COVID. And I started studying with a woman named Melissa Tiers in New York, who is phenomenal. She's she calls her work integrative hypnosis and integrative coaching. And Melissa and I have become really good friends over the years. And there's a phenomenon when we start to understand the unconscious and subconscious ways that they are influencing everything around us, our entire experience of reality, including everything I shared about my beliefs, etc. Something that was incredibly interesting that I reflect on quite a bit in the process of my recovery, which I didn't mention, is that early on, my father came to me. My parents did lots of things for me in my injury, but two things that I'll share. They never shared with me this diagnosis from the doctor, which is basically like, you're screwed, like we don't have, like the odds of you recovering is like not good, which can create a sort of induction, right? It's a very powerful level of like, let's say hypnosis. What happened was my father came to me when I was on a ventilator, and I was just like, pull the plug. Like, I'm not living like this. I'm an athlete. Like, there's just no way. And I like basically communicated that through a ventilator. And my father says to me, and my father is very psychic in different ways. And he only shares when he sees things that he knows. And I swear to you, Cherie, like when he's sure of something, he shares it and it's always come to pass. And my dad's not a bullshitter. So in that moment in time, he said to me, Colette, I know in a year, you're going to be walking, if not running. You just got to like do your time and get through this. He's like, and he looked at me in the eyes and said it with such clarity and conviction that it created a very powerful seed for me that was in and of itself part of this larger like ecosystem of repair, right? And shamanic process. When we're talking about psychedelic change work, I think about the psychedelic experience as not so much this sort of relentless process of self-healing and reflection, which is of course incredibly important, incredibly important. But it's how we can do the self-healing, the self-regulation, how we can build the co-regulation with those of us around us, how we can take the self and the co-regulation to a community level of awareness, and how we can take that awareness to how we are engaging in the wider system of our ecological reality through a lens of compassion, awareness, social justice, and earth justice. And so oftentimes what I do with my clients who are coming to me to really do psychedelic change work and what I call self-directed neuroplasticity, psychedelic self-directed neuroplasticity, which is incredibly important for people who are using psychedelics to heal some particular phenomenon, is that, integration is awesome. It's incredibly important, but I think of it, Cherie, like 80% preparation. And this is where people are like, what are your intentions? Intentions are a really powerful hypnotic induction. And so oftentimes what I do with people, because I'll receive people who are like, I'm totally dysregulated. I've tried everything. And they want to just jump right in and use psychedelics. And I say to them, I want to work with you for a few months before I feel comfortable. And I think that you will ultimately feel the benefit from doing anything. And what we do is we start that process. I teach them how to self-regulate by using self-hypnosis, by using polyvagal practices, by learning how to catch their subconscious and unconscious beliefs that are dismantling their equanimity in their life first and foremost. Then they start practicing that with their partners or with their kids. After they got it like in the practice and the moving and grooving. Then, we kind of are in that process and that flow. And then we start creating essentially the hypnotic induction for the psychedelic work. What is the landing pad on the other side? What's it going to be like when you receive the change?
Hypnotic induction. I just want to repeat
Yes.
that. Hypnotic induction. Okay.
Many people who I would say more on the side of neurodivergent versus neurotypical individuals tend to be more highly suggestible.
Right.
This is something, right? You know this. So this is something that is incredibly important for people who are neurodivergent, who are looking to work with psychedelics or dropping into psychedelic community to empower themselves and also to protect themselves. And so I train people in this phenomenon, training them how to use their brain, about their nervous system, about how the subconscious and unconscious mind works, and how to remove myself as much as possible from the equation and focus in on how to support them in that process. So that's for me, a big part of how I like to work with people and frame the whole experience.
Raise your hand if psychedelic medicines have changed your life. Raise both hands if you are a cisgender female that wants to serve in the psychedelic renaissance as an integration coach, a healer, or a psychedelic therapist, but has no idea where and how to begin. Soul Sister, welcome home to the Psyched Souls Integration Coaching Certification Program for Visionary Women, our best-selling 6-month professional training and personal development program where you get to dive deep into your own integration practice way beyond meditation and journaling while getting certified as a high-caliber psychedelic integration coach and guide. In our iconic program, you do your work through an experiential, creativity-centered, and system-rebelling transformational vortex that is grounded in proven methods and expert-level technologies, preparing you to take root as a psychedelic leader in your community. You have full intention to participate in this revival, and we provide you with the know-how, with the tools, and with a full-body confidence to create it. So if you are a psychedelic-informed woman with a huge heart of service that is ready to get off the fence and unapologetically step out into the world offering psychedelic support, stop playing small sister, take a leap into your soul-aligned, paradigm-shifting service career in the psychedelic revival and help spread more light consciousness in the world. Learn more and apply at psychedsoul.com/training. That's incredible. I love the way that you're able to really get into the nuance experience. And I want to just circle back to what you said, which I feel is really important for people to understand. Right now, integration as a word is like the new kid on the block. It's super sexy. Everyone wants to do integration, and they believe that they're something that you can do or they're going to do after the experience for one, maybe two sessions, one, maybe 2 weeks, maybe just a couple of days. And then with that, they've concluded their
Right.
integration process. But integration really begins, the process of psychedelic integration begins the moment that the seed of the idea of you desiring or slash you hearing the call, as some of us hippies say, to
Mm.
hearing the call to go and participate in ceremony, that's the moment that psychedelic integration begins. And from that
Mm-hmm.
moment, essentially, you begin preparing for the experience. You begin, starting to think, okay, which medicine should I do? How much should I take? Where should I do it? Which retreat? Stuff like that. But we don't really tend to spend too much time on the emotional preparation, the conditioning, the preconditioning of the mind, on learning these tools that would enable us to arrive to the ceremony with discernment, with awareness, with an ability to navigate the space and to really master our own experience. And I really appreciate you putting
100%.
the emphasis, yeah, thank you, on again on front loading basically the integration process, right? I mean, this is kind of what I'm calling it, front loading the integration process before you arrive to the experience. And by that virtue, you are actually time collapsing your post experience integration process, meaning it's going to go by faster, quicker, smoother, a lot less challenging, and a lot more sustainable and regenerative.
Yes, that was, and I have to say, Cherie, I think it was like 2016 when I first connected with you in your work. You were the first person that I knew of, heard of when you were in LA. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You were the first person talking about this really around the time where I was like, why is nobody considering this? Especially with the extreme differences from how, let's say, shamanic, plant medicine, entheogenic cultures work with suddenly like exploding in the framework of the global north. And I think that
Mm.
this is a very interesting timeline that we're in where people are not taking psychedelic, well, no, of course they are, but like now that the culture isn't like, let's try psychedelics for psychonautic exploration or just to have fun, or like, of course those things are there, but it's like the acute healing. And so when we're taking these substances for the acute phenomenon or like the acute intention of wanting to heal something, it becomes, I think, more delicate, especially in the ecosystem that's surrounding it. So this is why we have to be that much more attentive to how we're going into things.
Absolutely. And then, another word that I keep bringing up, which I feel is so important in this context, is ecosystem. When you were describing what psychedelic change work is basically taking it from the individual to the collective. One way
Yes.
to look at that is, what I call integration 1.0, which is, yeah, you do your, what we call the inner work, the inner healing. You do your attachment work, your inner child work, the work with the family, with your lineage. And then when you feel prepared to step outside of that family constellation, outside of that personal ecosystem, then you discover the transpersonal, that which is outside of the self, and that external ecosystem that we are a part of, and how everything that you do, just like you described earlier with that seed of the spark that your father just planted in you when he looked you right in the eye and looked so clearly at you, and just like that powerful prayer that was put in
Mm.
you, you took that and you nurtured that and you allowed that to basically, you birthed that into your new self, and now that new self is basically like mothering new realities. So this is what I'm seeing
Mm.
as a psychedelic change work.
Yeah, I think it's also for me too, like, you know, and I get it. I get that the situation politically, especially as someone comes from the United States, really challenging and difficult. I'm the founder of the decriminalization campaign in Philadelphia, the entheogenic decriminalization campaign. I've been involved in political work my whole life. I have an undergraduate degree in international development and relations. I lived in DC working for environmental lobbies for many years. So it's like for me, a lot of people start drinking ayahuasca, and especially here in Costa Rica, and I've had a foot in Costa Rica almost 13 years. Um, and it's like people are searching ayahuasca, and like, we're gonna like quit our jobs, leave the United States, start an intentional community, all of our friends, everyone's gonna think the same, we're gonna drink ayahuasca all the time, it's gonna be perfect, like utopia. And then they realize they got all the same problems in this communities as everywhere else. It's like we are only as healthy as the communities we live in, as the systems that we're a part of. And we live in a globalized system these days. So we have some really hard, challenging realities that I personally can't ignore. It weighs on me. It weighs on me tremendously, especially because of how my neurophenomenology works. Right now, I just got back to Costa Rica a few days ago. I was in the States the last 6 months dealing with some health issues. I had a hip replacement. I had all these different things. And this is the hottest year on record in Costa Rica, by far.
It's
I,
so
I just
hot.
got
I
back to my
swear.
land. I can't even believe how hot it is. I just saw my neighbors. I came
I'm
in 5 minutes
literally
before
in
this call. I bet you are.
dripping
You're on the
water as
beach.
we talk.
I'm at 3,000 feet and I'm sweating
Oh my
like hell.
God.
This
It's
is not
been hot.
normal. So why is that happening? It's happening because of human-induced climate change. Like these are the realities that are hard pills to swallow. That I think needs to be part of how like psychedelic change work can be this thing, the individual, the interpersonal, the collective, and holding space for it and creating better designs, a better human plan. Yeah.
Amen to that. And on that note, I think it's so interesting that you brought up Costa Rica and how people move to Costa Rica to drink ayahuasca. Just yesterday, I discovered that ayahuasca is not even legal in Costa Rica. Did you know that?
Just yesterday?
I, I mean, officially, it is illegal in Costa Rica. But I do know
Correct.
that they also kind of practice like a decrim approach, meaning, they don't necessarily prosecute, hence the many, many retreat centers that operate above ground and open air. I'm not sure how, but they do. I heard that maybe they give money, but okay. But I mean, the grass ain't always greener. And basically, like the sacred plant brew is illegal in the United States. It's illegal here as well. So don't think that if you're making the move to the tropics, things will look greener.
I have to
Yeah.
say, a lot of the complex, and like again, as someone who thinks in systems to really challenging degrees, thinks in systems, sees things in systems, the system of power and privilege uh, that is pervasive in the sapient reality, let's say, has lots of beneficial things to it, has lots of beneficial things to it, and also has a lot of challenging, complex things to it. And in my experience, especially with, let's just say, in various forms of ayahuasca community, and especially how radically, ayahuasca as a technology has suddenly become integrated with the global north, relatively speaking, there's a lot of beautiful, important, supportive, like amazing things happening, and there's also a lot of very problematic things happening in the construct of that too. So, because for me, as a student, and really just like, I don't even have the word right now. I would just say like someone who bows to that technology, the power of that technology in nature. To me, it's a revealer of these systems. It's how and some of my teachers talk about like we're students of nature, and it's a technology to study nature and these dynamics in nature, the power dynamics in nature. And yeah, and so I think that's like this has to be an attentive part of the psychedelic process for people. It really does. And I think that to me is a crucial part of the integration. It's not to say that I have all the answers or really anyone does, but that the systems that are part of that and how we can be creating more compassion for people who are coming from different perspectives, different religions, different colors, like different monetary, amounts of, money they have or don't have. And I think the polarization that's happening in an online reality at this point is very strange. So yeah, it's there's very interesting things going on.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely.
ayahuasca is not legal in Costa Rica.
It's
I
not
have to
legal.
share though. I'll call it out. This is my perspective of Costa Rica is such an interesting community that has been exploding with individuals like me, for sure, who love it here and have been moving here. And there's a certain level of like, it's not to say that Ticos are simple-minded, but there's a lot that they haven't culturally seen. Like, for example, there's been ayahuasca centers here for a long time, but there's a lot that they just don't, they haven't seen until really very, very recently. Because they can't not see it anymore. There's something like 80 different ayahuasca centers here right now. I had dinner with Jules Evans last night, and he told me that there was a meeting with a bunch of different organizations and the Costa Rican government and what they're going to do about this. Because taking psychedelics for the majority of Costa Ricans is not in alignment with their religious or cultural values.
Right. And then all of this is happening on their domain. And people are arriving here and just erecting retreat centers left and right. And man, the stories I hear about what is happening literally just around the corner from me is one of the largest and most well-known retreat centers probably in the world. And the stories that come out of this place, good God. Yeah, so maybe this is a topic to be continued. Well, Colette, we always conclude with a rapid fire round. Are you ready for the 5 epic facts?
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, you just got to shoot. All right, what's your favorite psychedelic?
Ooh, ayahuasca.
Favorite thing to do after a ceremony?
Eat meat, which I know is not... Don't tell anyone.
I love it. I love to eat. Me too. What's one big lesson psychedelics have taught you?
Humility.
Who is one person, dead or living, that you would sit in ceremony with?
Bob Marley.
What's your secret to living epic?
Deep breaths, and trying to find pleasure in the littlest and biggest ways.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
So yeah, usually we like to conclude with your message to the world. So is there one final word you would like to share with our audience?
Just go find that tree. I mean, I've just been in the city for 6 months. So I just I'm going to go hug a tree right now as soon as we end this call. So if you find that tree somewhere in your city, in Philly's neighborhoods that don't even have trees still, go find that tree and have a conversation with it. As soon as you possibly can, if you haven't done that in a while. And then that way, I'll leave it there.
God, I love it. This is probably one of my favorite messages ever. Go hug a tree. Talk with a tree. Yes. So tell us more about your offering. So you have 20% off of coaching at condormedicine.com with a coupon code PsychedSoul25. Of course, we're going to put all the links for you in the show notes. How can listeners connect with you, Colette?
You guys can connect with me on my Instagram. I'm at condor_medicine. You can find me on my website, condormedicine.com, LinkedIn, under my name, and psychic signals, whatever it takes. But those are the main ways. I at this point I'm really focusing on doing 6-week coaching containers with individuals, and I have lots of different things I'm involved with. But yeah, that's really what I'd love to offer all of you for the next 3 months. A discount for after we launch this podcast. Please connect with me if you'd like to connect and do some self-directed neuroplasticity work.
I love it. Please take Colette up on her offering. I mean, you heard yourself what deep medicine she holds, and maybe I'll register myself, Colette. We'll see. I'd love to work with you,
I would
sister.
love that.
I'd love to work with you,
Thank
sister.
you.
Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful medicine with us. I love you so much.
I love you so much too. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you, especially this past year. I have so much deep respect and reverence for you and your work. So it's been so great to be here. Thank you.
Likewise, sister. Thank you everyone for listening. And remember, it's not the psychedelic, it's the integration.